The final episode of Season 1 of The Last of Us has aired, so let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Let me know, what did you think about The Last of Us Season 1? And give me a point of reference. Are you someone that played through the video games? Are you someone that was introduced to The Last of Us through the show? Or are you kind of in the middle like me? I've played a little bit of the first game, but I haven't played the entire first game, so mostly I was being introduced to it by the show itself. This is a spoiler review, so feel free to spoil away down below in the comments section. One quick announcement, I'm going to be at Fan Expo Cleveland March 24th through the 26th with Austin Burke and John Flickinger leading a couple panels as well as doing a meet and greet. Then the weekend after that, March 30th through April 2nd, I'm going to be at MegaCon in Orlando with Cody Leach, Austin Burke, John Flickinger. Also on our stage will be Jandreau as well as Perri, Nemiroff, all of us leading panels, all of us doing meet and greets. If you're in the movie YouTube space, you don't want to miss MegaCon this year. With that said, let's get started talking about the show. And as a just kind of broad perspective on it before I dive into the good and the bad, I would say that this is the video game adaptation which feels like it was handled with the most love and care, where they actually tried to make a quality prestige TV show out of a video game. So elements of it are fantastic, which also highlights the aspects that didn't work as well, because it did so many things where it was like, that was awesome. And then there was a handful of things where it was like, but why didn't you do this? Why did you do this? Why did you emphasize this? So as I go into this, just point of reference, I think that this is now the standard by which you need to evaluate all. This is the bar. This is the new thing of like, wait, they've shown, Craig Mazin, Neil Druckmann have shown, you can do a faithful adaptation of a video game and make it prestige, but that does not mean there isn't still room for improvement. There's definitely room for improvement going forward with this show, and some odd choices that were made. With that said, let's get started with the good. And as I just kind of mentioned, right off the bat, the thing that elevates all the material here is that from the get-go, the main writer, Craig Mazin, respected the source material. And so he worked on it with the writer of the video games, and Craig Mazin went into it essentially saying, I think that this is the best written video game of all time. It's already a fantastic story. It already has fantastic characters. My job is not to fix it or do some dramatic adaptation. It's just to take this game and translate it into the video game format, where there's differences between when you're playing levels versus watching a story. You actively play a level, you actively play a shootout versus watching a TV show. What's compelling when you're watching it passively is different from what's compelling in active video game play, and how much emphasis you put on dialogue varies between those two things. And that was his perspective going into it, in which case he took a game that was highly praised for its story and its characters and did his best to just make that what you see. And even in some of the interviews that both promoting the show as well as the after interviews on the episodes themselves, they had the formal interviews. Craig Mazin was wanting to stick more to as close as possible to the game, and the creator Neil Druckmann was the one pushing to change things a little bit. And that's an interesting dynamic. You don't hear a lot of times where the creator's involved in it and he's wanting to change things more than the other writer who's just a fan of the material saying like, no, you already nailed it, so let's just stick to it. You just hear that, just these quotes before the show even debuted. You heard Craig Mazin talking about it and you immediately went, this guy gets it. This guy is a fan himself. He's trying to preserve what people loved about this game. Why did it become a phenomenon, this incredibly selling game with amazing reviews? Why did that happen? How do we just take that over to television? He's a fan, but he's also a writer, and just trying to balance that properly. So that's the broad picture, but kind of going back to the source material as well as the show itself, what makes it work is that you just have very well-rounded characters and a storytellers that want to earn moments and feel the consequences, where they're really thinking through, if this apocalypse happened, how would that affect different people? How would different people survive? What would it do to their humanity? And kind of telling this gut-wrenching story about Joel, who's a totally normal guy until all of this happens and loses his daughter in the process. And when you're actually, this is kind of a fun fact, if you don't, I've mentioned this in some other places, but as a movie critic person, one of the ways that I kind of learned about movies, storytelling, character arcs was by listening to a podcast called Script Notes. I went to listen to like the first 100, 150, 200 episodes of this podcast called Script Notes that is hosted by John August and Craig Mazin. Craig Mazin is the creator of The Last of Us, the TV show, with the creator of the video games, Neil Druckmann. And one of the things that Craig Mazin always talked about on that podcast was how you're always trying to find the story that this character is, what's most compelling for a specific character. So who is the most compelling character to be on an adventure trying to keep a girl safe? A father who lost his daughter and for 20 years has been closed off. For 20 years, he won't let anybody in because he's so afraid of that pain. And then you create a scenario where he's forced to protect another girl, and he knows if he does this, it's going to expose him to be vulnerable to that loss again. It's the perfect arc for that character. That's the journey. There's something about that so compelling, especially like, it's no matter what, I think anyone can relate to, like, oh wow, that's powerful. I've got 2 daughters. I've got a son. And you just play that out. What if you lost everything? And 20 years later, all your existence is trying to survive and not relive that pain. And then he's on a journey that opens him up to the joys of life again that he hasn't really experienced, connecting with someone, loving someone in a vulnerable way. As soon as you open the door for the positive things that come from love and companionship, you also open yourself up to the heartbreak that comes with it. And that's the journey that he's on all throughout this season. And that's just so compelling. It's such a great arc. And especially as you kind of move into the final episode. And I'll have some thoughts on the final episode and how some of that. But you create a scenario where you have a guy that exists to survive. And he only goes on this mission because maybe it provides hope for mankind that there's some cure that could come out of it. And what's the most painful choice that he could have to make that would also be an easy choice? You create a scenario where you get to the end of the season and you can potentially stop this apocalypse, but it costs you that person. And in any other context, well, sure, anything's worth it to save mankind, except to this one character who can't deal with that again. And he won't accept that. And you have a scenario where for 20 years, everyone's been looking for a cure. And so they just see it and they're willing to do anything. But the person that they picked to protect her is the one person that would become just absolutely cannot accept that cost. Even if the cost will save everyone. Something just about that's so deep and compelling. And I watched it through the episode. I didn't play through the game to see kind of how it's actually, Druckmann wrote that originally, but translated, and it's just a very profound thing. And compelling story arcs, compelling character arcs boil down to choices. Having characters choose this path or that path, and finding ways to make those compelling choices because of the stakes as well as what it means for that individual. And this guy that didn't want to take this girl, she's just cargo. By the end of it, he's willing to say, the apocalypse keeps on going because this cargo is now his new baby girl. There's something about that's like really powerful stuff. And they didn't like cheat any of it. They earn those moments. There's this long journey that they're on to get to the point in time where that change happens and he sees her differently and realizes, I can't lose her. and it's written for adults. It's not written to be dumbed down. For whatever reason, the HBO system knows how to like actually create broadly accessible shows with very dark subject matter in a way that it seems like none of the other streaming services or channels are able to like crack the code the way that HBO's been doing this since the 90s. Like just premium stuff. And here they took video game adaptation, not known for being premium stuff, and they were able to pull it off. Other things to talk about in here. The design of the creatures themselves, the infected. They did their best to adapt what's in the video games, and like they found a way to make what's worked in a video game work in live action and be just as unsettling. Like I hate looking at like the clickers and their split open heads. I hate looking at the things that come out of their mouths as a little addition they had for the show. I hate seeing it for the right reasons. It's a perfectly creepy and unsettling image. It's gross. And not just like, oh, a chainsaw ripped off an arm, someone beaten eaten alive. Not gross in that sense, but this other way of just ick factor that's the perfect type of ick factor for a show like this. Just visualize how horrifying these infected really are. And even tying it to fungus, so it's not just rotting flesh. It's fungus growing out of people. That is so nasty to me, so unsettling. It's perfectly disturbing. I'll have thoughts on the amount of infected we see in the show, but there's a number of really cool sequences in here of where they do kind of, whether it's stealth mode sequences, big shootouts in certain sequences, it delivers. Whatever you're supposed to feel, there's a sniper in a building, zombies chasing people, sneaking around, you're on the edge of your seat. You feel the danger because you know someone could die at any point in time. And to that point, like even as you go throughout the show, it sets up these moments of victory with people, but there's always this sense of dread because you know anyone can die. Anyone can die. And because of that, it earns the moments of victory because you know they might not have made it. And then when the moments of tragedy happen, you feel it because they had overcome something to get to that moment, and then there's these dire consequences. Other positives in here, I love the idea of showing all the different ways that people survived a 20-year-long apocalypse. And so we spend a lot of time with Joel, and we don't have that many flashbacks of him younger or in the 20 years, but we get all these little glimpses of pieces of information of basically totally normal guy had to kill people to survive and make it to this point in time. He's turned into a pretty shady guy just to survive and keep the people that he loves alive. You do like episode 3 where you have this survivalist who hated everybody, but it doesn't mean he doesn't need companionship and a friend. And so he kind of loves the fact that he's by himself and then find someone to spend time with. Like, I like that. Let's give a perspective of have some little love stories in there of like how different people survived, how different they lived through this, what that looked like, seeing these different communities that popped up and the way that people found hope and how certain people exploited the hope that others were looking for, as you saw in episode 8, where you have this cult leader that positions himself as the father to a whole group of people and uses the Bible to manipulate them to gain control and giving them hope and forgiveness while also being just this really sick person. I love getting those glimpses and making this world feel like it's populated with a bunch of different stories, and no matter where you go, you'll encounter someone who has a different tale. What is that, episode 6, where they run into the couple and Joel's holding them hostage to get some soup, and he's like, did you guys come to hide out here to get away from people? Like, no, we came out here to get away from people before the apocalypse. Like, there's little details that, like, yeah, there's people that live in very remote places, and the apocalypse wouldn't have affected certain aspects of their life in a sense. I love that fleshed out world that we got with all of it. In the first couple episodes, the cold opens where they did like a TV broadcast interview from like 1967, and then they did one of the expert on fungus. Those cold opens were so good. I wish we got more of those because they were so chilling in presenting information that scares you of like, wait, how realistic is this? They say it and it ties this fantastical idea of the world ending because of a zombie apocalypse or infected apocalypse, and they put enough reality to it, touching on things that are just real enough. And your brain goes, wait, that could happen. So chilling without needing to do big and flashy stuff. Just information in the context of this show. Haunting stuff. I guess I haven't talked about our Joel and Ellie relationship there. And somewhat too kind of what I mentioned earlier of great stories are when you pair up what's the exact journey that a specific character needs to go on that's most compelling. So you have a girl who's never had parents, has no connections, has this very dark side, is very angry and very violent. And someone comes along that is a father without a daughter. You have two people that are superficially very combative that are put together and kind of forced to form a relationship, father-daughter relationship, that neither one of them is looking for. Both of them kind of are trying to avoid it. And once again, that's when it's compelling and interesting. When, as cliched as when opposites attract, that's when you see it. And obviously not in a romantic sense, not that, but that father-daughter connection there, that each of them needed that. Each of them wanted that, but also both of them were afraid of it, afraid of losing, having lost again. That's when you have powerful stuff. So just in general, just a show that had great source material and then they executed it right. So you have this fleshed out, populated world of interesting stories, of dangers. And that is the creatures, but that's also all the different ways that people had to become desperate to survive. And everyone is afraid of the infected, but also everyone is afraid of everyone else, because they don't know who's infected and they don't know who's trying to kill them. And so it's just a world that always feels like you are in danger, no matter where you are, no matter what you find. This could be it. You could die. And mature characters, mature story arcs, and earning the payoff. Generally speaking, fantastic. Because it's so good, it makes the bad stand out. So let's move on. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, because certain things are so good, and it does certain things, you go, oh, that was cool. You notice it when it's not there. So the big ones that immediately come to mind is the first couple episodes have these great cold opens, and you're like, oh, that was cool. I want more of that. And then they just stop at the third episode. You have 7 more episodes without them, and you go, well, I would have liked to have more of that. And likewise, early on, you have a bunch of clicker action and infected action, and you move into the back half of the season, and it's so noticeable how few infected there are in the back half of the season. After they do the city in the 2-episode one where they're trying to get out of the city and the ground implodes and all these infected pop up out of the ground, you have like that gigantic sequence. And then the rest of the season, it felt like they kind of disappeared. Like we had very few interactions with them. And that's weird. There's not another word for it. Like, I get what they were going for. I get that it's about The Last of Us and how they're broken. But you build the whole thing is built around, there's been an apocalypse involving these infected. They're so dangerous. And we got to solve the problem of the infected. And then the infected aren't really around. You don't see any of them. That's weird. And it makes even the choice at the end seem like, what does this even matter? Because everyone's gone crazy. They're too broken. And the infected, where are they even? I don't even know where they're at. Who cares about the infected? We need to fix people. So the absence of the infected was just so strange and like a glaring omission in a show sold on this concept with the goal of we have to get this person over here to stop all these things that are out there. But where are they? Why is this so important if there are so few of them now that you can go episodes and barely see any of them? That was odd. Likewise, if you only have 9 episodes, doing 2 full episodes of flashback love stories, kind of an odd use of your season. I didn't mind episode 3, that early on in the show, pausing and like, look, not everyone's been in these QZs. People have these whole journeys and stories. And then the way that it brings in just a little bit of Joel into that journey and kind of fleshing out these networks of these people that are trading things and how did all that, like, I thought that one worked at that point in time in the season. But then when you get to the second one with Ellie and the mall, like, we're getting pretty close to the end, and it doesn't feel like we've built up enough tension right before the finale of, like, we need to ramp things up, and there's some plot things we need to make some progress on, and instead we're running around at the mall. And that, like, take that sequence. One of my issues, they didn't do enough of these cold opens. You take that sequence and you make it like a 10-minute mini movie at the beginning of episode 8, beginning of episode 7 or something like that. And you don't linger on the whole thing, but you kind of show very quickly this friendship, potential love interest, and then that's the beginning of episode 7. You show the friendship portion of it. They're hanging out, and there's a choice they need to make. That's the beginning of episode 7. Beginning of episode 8, you see that the friend dies, and that's how she got bit. Instead of a whole episode, you do something like that, and you'd have those cold opens that are just like these glimpses that make you go, oh, that's why she's that way. As opposed to an episode that feels like we're hitting the brakes. Right as we need to like build, like Joel's in danger, we got to do it, find out a way to keep him alive, we got to get to, right as tension's building, we hit the brakes and do a flashback for a whole episode. Stop the forward story momentum. That was odd. I don't think that was a good use of an episode or a good way to tell that information. I think that's like 2 cold opens right there. You resolve my cold open issue and you keep the story moving forward. And kind of along these same lines, the final episode, that felt clearly like 2 episodes to me. And you can even see where the exact cut point is. Episode 1, after what happened in episode 8, where Joel's desperately trying to rescue her while he's waking up, kills dudes viciously. You see the most cruel, brutal version of him. He's killing people in cold blood because they took her from him. And then she ends up saving herself by killing the original Joel and then this cult leader guy. And finally, at this end of this episode, he calls her, baby girl. Like, fully, he is all in. This is his new daughter that he will do anything to protect, and he will do anything to keep her alive. Anything. They do that. And they have to like rush him being like friendly. And so this very heavy-handed like little bit at the beginning, like, of, tell me some jokes. Do this. And it just felt like very heavy-handed because they have to do all of that in the first half of this episode to set up the second half. And then they go into the city. It just feels like there wasn't any overt obstacles right as we approach this city. It feels like right here you could have to get to where they're trying to have a zombie attack. They have to wait, stealth through some stuff, and then they get there, knocked out. And so the next to last episode ends with Joel in the hospital and discovering that she's going into surgery and they're going to kill her to save mankind. Episode ends. So add a little zombie attack in there and have an episode of them spend a little bit more time letting us experience that relationship of them now that they're on the other side. He sees her as the daughter. Let us spend a little bit more time in that. Give us a zombie adventure in there while we're trying to get to this point. They get to that point. They've made it. We win. Uh-oh. they're going to kill her to save mankind. Credits roll. That's just like that. My mind feels so obvious. That's where an episode ends. You end on that cliffhanger. Oh crap. Joel's not going to be okay with that. It's about to go down. And that tension, like that's what I didn't feel was what they had at the last few episodes as you're approaching the finale. You want to feel that tension of that choice, that what choice will he make? What are the stakes here? What will Joel have to do to save her one more time? We went into the finale and all of that takes place in under 50 minutes. All of it, like all the friendship, the choice, the action, and just having a setup episode. They made it. He has a new daughter, and now they're going to take her away for the ultimate good, saving mankind. Episode ends. Then do a finale where instead of it being like Joel, they're walking through a hallway and then he just overpowers the guys and kills everybody. I mean, you make it this whole stealth thing of he's going back to get her, and it's like an episode of that, and an episode of kind of the stuff at the end where she knows that he's lying about what happened, but she's not going to allow herself to accept that. It was like everything in this final episode was awesome and needed to be twice as long to feel fully earned, fully paid off. And they had enough episodes to do this if you don't do 2 flashback episodes. Take the second flashback episode, put that as the cold open on episodes like 6 and 7 or whatever. Episode 8 is the first half of the finale, ends with an awesome cliffhanger, and then you spend a week like marinating in, oh man, it's about to go down. And you feel that feeling of, oh man, wow. I would like, before we went into the finale, I was thinking like, what are they even going to do for the finale? Like, how's it going to be satisfying? Because they haven't even built that tension about getting there or anything. And then watch the episode. Right, this should have been 2 episodes. And I would have the exact feeling I would have had if they had that break right there. That's weird. Just weird. Especially because the show's so good. It's so well written, so well thought out. And having not played the game, saw some articles, little pieces where people were saying that maybe the biggest flaw at certain point in times, the last 2 episodes were kind of beat for beat, shot for shot translations of the video game into television. And you go, that's awesome. The faithfulness is awesome. But as television, it would have been better if it had a little bit more time to breathe, a little bit more time to marinate in it, have the character moments, have the action. And since we had a shortage of infected, have some infected shootouts in there, have some infected stealth in there too, to just really pay it all off. So anyway, I spent a lot of time on the negative there on the end. To be entirely clear, this is the best, most like the adaptation that feels like they had the most love, care. The higher ups gave people the freedom to like pull it off right with the tone, the vibe, the performances, the character arcs, got all of that stuff right. And because it's so good, it highlights some of the stuff that was like, oh, I wish that, man, we needed more infected in the back half. Man, I wish that this would have been spaced out a little bit more. I wish that this episode was 2 parts. You can nitpick that stuff, and it matters a lot more when you're like, this thing was awesome. And they're kind of nitpicks because it was so good, but that doesn't mean they're not real, legitimate concerns at the same time. So, that's my take on it. I didn't know how long this was going to. I actually been feeling under the weather, so I was trying to shoot this in one kind of long take. I thought about doing it as a live stream. Maybe I should have, but let me know what you guys thought. Feel free to spoil away, as I was obviously spoiling away in all of this. Let me know all that fun stuff down below in the comment section, and keep talking.